Good morning to everyone who has joined us. Grace and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Gracia y paz a vosotros de parte de Dios nuestro Padre y del Señor Jesucristo. Para escuchar en español, busquen el globo al pie de la pantalla. Al hacer clic, pueden escoger el idioma. Si están usando celular, deben escoger opciones para encontrar interpretación. I just offered a few words of instruction for those who wish to listen via Spanish interpretation. My name is Ray Reimer. I've been serving as your moderator this biennium. I welcome all who have gathered for this 2020 delegate session of Western District Conference, both those who are delegates and those who are observers, and I call us to order. These are odd times. This feels to be an odd way to gather together to join God in mission. And yet, even in this virtual delegate assembly, I believe we can listen and watch for the whisper and movement of the Holy Spirit among us as we seek to be faithful followers of Jesus Christ. Lois Barrett, our moderator-elect, will be assisting periodically in leading. June Crable, our elected conference secretary, is joining us from her home, and we'll hear from her in a few minutes. Heidi Regier-Kreider, our conference minister, will share a bit later, and various other staff are connecting in different ways. I'll introduce the commission chairs a bit later. This year, we won't be having any guests from other organizations address us, but many institutions with which we have formal relationships have submitted either written reports, which have been posted, or video snapshots, and I trust you've availed yourself of them. As we begin, Lois and I will offer a few instructions and observations about some special rules for this particular assembly. If you're having technology issues, please reach out via email, text, or phone to our tech support person. That's Ryan Gertzen-Regier. You can reach him via email at ryan.gertzen@gmail.com or by phone or text at 316-804-8765. That info is also on the assembly flyer, frequently asked question sheet that was distributed about a week ago to everyone and has been included in recent emails to delegates. All attendees, delegates, and observers automatically were supposed to have had their microphone and video turned off when they entered this webinar meeting. Upon request, that is, if permitted by a host, you'll be allowed to unmute and turn on video. We'll note in a moment how to request that or anything else. A number of participants, that being the officers, the commission chairs, and some staff and translators, have been identified as so-called panelists for this meeting, as most of them are expected to participate at some point. I encourage such individuals to keep your microphone muted unless invited to speak. And if those of you who are not as familiar with Zoom, the control for your microphone and your camera, your video is, I think, normally on the lower left-hand corner of the control bar at the bottom of your screen. Lois, would you like to continue?
Yes, we want to encourage everyone to use the chat feature within Zoom if you're a delegate, or the comment feature within Facebook Live for any procedural points or questions you have. We have folks who will be constantly monitoring them. Sandra Montes Martinez and Asia Fry are going to be monitoring, as well as Caleb Yoder and Kathy Neufeld Dunn. They'll be monitoring whatever you say on chat or comment, and periodically forwarding them to Ray if he doesn't see them already on his own. We may bunch some questions together if they're all on the same topic, and pause to call for any further questions on these points, but you can submit questions anytime. If you share a note or question in chat or comment, please include your name and your congregation. Your chats will be seen by all of the presenters or panelists whose squares you see on this screen now, but not necessarily by all attendees. Depending on the length or the complexity of the comment, Ray or I or someone else will either repeat it orally or will have the host turn on your camera and microphone so that you can address the delegate session directly. Delegates will have priority in asking questions or making comments. But if you're watching via Facebook Live, you can still use the comment feature and direct questions and the monitors will forward them. And we'll include these as we have time. At various delegate sessions in the past, we've had a roll call of Western District congregations, both to help us connect and as a prelude to the report of our credentials committee. And we've had to do that a little bit differently this year. We've had the digital snapshots that various congregations have submitted that have allowed us to better know the mission and identity of the various parts of our body and give us a bit of a sense of fellowship, even in this unusual time. Ray, you have a report.
Our bylaws indicate that a quorum for our assembly consists of representation by delegates from a majority of congregations belonging to Western District Conference. Currently, our area conference has 52 churches and 2 active church plants. Based on the registered delegates as of yesterday afternoon, 40 churches and church plants are represented today. So a quorum has been established for our assembly today. In 2020, Western District churches and church plants reported a total membership of 7,183 with 264 eligible votes. 114 votes are represented at today's delegate session, assuming everyone has managed to log on. I just mentioned voting. Assessing action on motions and other measures will necessarily have to have a different format this year due to our virtual meeting. We've researched this as best we could. We've observed what some other area conferences and other types of groups that are meeting virtually have been doing and have chosen the following as our path this year. First, due to some technical requirements involved with a virtual assembly, we've had to establish a special rule stipulating that each delegate will carry only 1 vote for this particular meeting. We certainly hope we can return to our usual process in the future of folks being able to carry multiple votes if that is necessary. Also, each delegate will need to be individually logged on to this Zoom webinar on a separate device, even if you're in a room with other delegates, in order to cast individual or discrete votes. We'll register votes via a polling feature. When actions arise, a simple poll question will appear on your screen in a subpanel, and you can register a yes or no vote, which will yield essentially instantaneous results, which will be reported back to me, and I will share them with you. We'll practice this in a few minutes when we approve the minutes of our 2019 assembly. I assume that will be something which is fairly uncontroversial. The preference will be to have simple votes for entire slates or motions, but if need be, we can create more complex or multiple polls on the spot. It will simply take just a bit longer. A final comment of this sort, the intention in organizing this virtual assembly was that delegates would interact via Zoom webinar, whereas non-delegates would participate in the the same session, but be watching via Facebook Live, but then they would not have access to voting polls and so on. Due to a bit of confusion earlier this week, we believe some instructions and passwords concerning how to log on to the Zoom webinar may have been sent to a few who are not official delegates of their respective congregations. I would offer those the option of either logging off of Zoom at this time and then rejoining via Facebook Live, or you can simply continue on on the Zoom app. But if you're not a delegate, I would ask that you please honor that role by not utilizing the polling feature on the occasions it will be displayed. At this time, I'll invite our elected conference secretary, June Crable, to very briefly review the minutes of the 2019 delegate session, which have been available on the conference website for 11 months or so, and I believe linked to the web page for this year's delegates as well. Let me note already now, if you have any questions about the minutes or corrections, you can start noting those already now utilizing the chat feature on the bottom bar of your Zoom application. June.
Thank you, Ray. The full minutes of last year's delegate session are available online. I offer just a few highlights. "119 delegates from 19 churches and church plants met for last year's delegate session on July 27 at Bethel College in North Newton, Kansas. Moderator Ray Reimer welcomed delegates and guests. We approved the minutes from the 2018 delegate session. We heard reports from our commissions as well as Mennonite Church USA, our conference minister, the Credentials Committee, and Camp Meneschal. With much joy, delegates voted to accept a new member congregation, Iglesia Camino de Santidad of Liberal, Kansas. Delegates voted to approve the 2020 proposed budget of $608,327. Also, we approved the ballot with a slate of 14 names for elected positions of leadership. This concludes my minutes. June Crable, Secretary for the Executive Board. Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the minutes as written.
Thank you, June. Is there a second to accept these minutes? If so, please note that in the chat, and I'll see if I can observe any. It looks like James Griffin has offered a second. He beat some others, so we've got seconds and thirds and all sorts of things. A last call at this point. Are there any corrections, questions, amendments pertaining to the 2019 minutes? I'm not seeing any of those appear on the chat feature. And so for our meeting host, Ryan, if we could have the poll regarding acceptance of the meetings of the minutes of the 2019 meeting put before us. I'll allow folks about 20, 30 seconds to enter your yay or nay, your C or your no, and simply click a button and then hit the submit.
And while we are waiting, Ray, it would be helpful if I know where James Griffin, which church he represents.
All right, James, if you could offer that as well.
Thank you.
We will have these little pauses as we wait. I'm noting that for some folks, the polling box appeared once and then disappeared, but I had that happen myself as well before I hit the submit button. So there'll be a few little foibles here. I'm waiting to see a report from, we are now having a report. And I maybe will inquire, am I the only one seeing the polling results, or are others seeing that as well?
Ray, I shared it with everybody, but I remember what we discussed earlier as well. I don't know what happened with the poll last time. Sorry, everybody, but hopefully you'll only see it once from now on for each poll. Well,
it looks like we have unanimous approval of our minutes of last year's 2019 minutes. I note in this particular poll, Ryan only gave us the option of yes or no. When we had a practice round a week ago, he also gave options such as, I think I'm in the wrong meeting, but we didn't have that today. Let me get another screen up here, if I can get my cursor moved around, and we'll proceed on. Our conference minister, Heidi Revere-Kreider, is now going to share with us a bit more about the wide-ranging work of our conference in her State of the Conference report. Heidi.
Good morning, delegates and friends of Western District Conference. It's great to be with you this morning. And thank you so much for joining this session as we experiment with new forms of doing business together. I also want to express gratitude today for everyone who has made this weekend's assembly events possible, and to all our leaders and congregation members and volunteers who offer their time and their skills to God's work through the church. To all of you, especially in these unusual and challenging times. In my reflections today, I am going to consider our current realities through the lens of WDC's mission statement. The mission of Western District Conference is to empower Anabaptist Mennonite congregations to witness and invite others to faith in Jesus Christ, to dwell in just and loving relationships, and to connect to God's mission in the world. WDC, Witness, Dwell, Connect. When our world is turned upside down by a pandemic and movements for racial justice, by economic crisis, tumultuous politics, and a changing climate, just to name a few of the realities we face, what does it mean for WDC to follow our mission? Well, first of all, we continue to witness and invite others to faith in Jesus Christ. Shifting from in-person gatherings in our congregations to electronic meetings didn't close the church. It just meant that we continue to proclaim the faith in new forms. So over the recent months, Western District Conference has shared resources with our congregations for online worship, preaching, Sunday school, youth ministry, and safe sanctuaries in a time of pandemic. Our resource library has hosted online children's summer story hour, offered bundles of books for study groups, and is continuing to provide resources for pickup or to be mailed out, even though right now the physical library is closed to the public due to COVID. And meanwhile, you, our congregations and pastors and leaders, have creatively shared the gospel through whatever electronic and other formats work best in your context. We have seen new forms of collaboration emerging, such as congregations sharing study materials together, planning a joint online Good Friday service, coordinating a joint vacation Bible school online, and many other things. Several weeks ago, our Texas congregations planned a joint online worship service together. So altogether, we have been listening for God's voice speaking into our uncertainties, our fears, and our hopes through the stories of Scripture and our own experiences in the body of Christ. Now, more than ever, we need to witness and invite others to faith in Jesus Christ. Secondly, in the midst of our current realities, we are still being called to dwell in just and loving relationships. In a time of crisis, relationships are a lifeline. So back in March and again in June, Western District Conference hosted a series of Zoom meetings in English and in Spanish for pastors to gather and share updates and resources. The Spanish-speaking pastors have continued meeting bi-weekly for sharing prayer and encouragement. And online meetings of pastor peer groups and one-on-one conversations have been valuable support for our leaders as they, in turn, seek to nurture congregational relationships and to offer pastoral care in the midst of the pandemic. At the same time, the call for us to dwell in just and loving relationships has been tested by the injustices exposed by coronavirus and systemic racism. We know that some of us are beneficiaries of generational wealth and privilege, and others among us lack access to basic resources, dependable income, or safety during this time. So WDC has helped to connect congregations and pastors with financial resources from our denomination and other sources. And we have established our own Hope Fund to receive contributions and to offer grants to congregations that are impacted financially by COVID. So far, the Hope Fund has received over $38,000 from individual donors and congregations and has dispersed 7 grants to congregations. We are so grateful for the generosity and the grace of giving and receiving that reflects what it means to share in being the church together. Our relationships are also being stretched by differences of opinion, belief, and experience during this time. As congregations among us have discerned when and how to start in-person gatherings again, and how to acknowledge conflict and to determine vision for the future, WDC has offered recommendations for safe protocols and resources for leadership and discernment. At first, we may have thought that figuring out online worship and new technology were our biggest challenges, and we've done that quite well. But we know that we are also being called to much deeper spiritual practices of honesty, of patience and respect for one another, of compassion and grace, listening carefully, vulnerability, accountability, and speaking the truth in love. So now more than ever, we need to dwell in just and loving relationships. And finally, we continue to be called to connect to God's mission in the world. I don't know about you, but these days I wake up every morning asking, what in the world is God up to? And what does that mean for WDC and our congregations? We are not all impacted in the same ways by current events. Some of us are relatively unscathed by COVID, while others among us have lost jobs, have lost income, have lost important life events, and have even lost loved ones and friends and community members to the pandemic. We grieve with those who have lost like that. And we are linked to one another in the body of Christ and in the human family. And so it is clear that we are not going back to normal. We will be moving forward into new ways of being God's people in the world. To connect to God's mission in the world is to affirm that God passionately loves this hurting and beautiful world. And it means that God continually works for the wholeness of all creation. God is calling us into that same wholeness and greater life, not merely to carry on church institutions or programs, but to offer ourselves fully to the Spirit's transforming work, whatever that may mean, whatever risks that brings. We are not alone in this, thankfully. WDC provides networks among congregations and leaders. And we provide support from other partners, including our denomination, Mennonite Church USA. In April, MCUSA conference ministers began gathering in weekly Zoom meetings to share updates about how our conferences are responding to COVID and what we can learn from each other, how we can support each other. More recently, our conference minister meetings have shifted to focus on a framework for racial justice in Mennonite Church USA, and our denominational leaders have joined us for training and resourcing. It is my hope and intention that WDC will participate fully in the recommendations and resources that our denomination is preparing to offer for education, for assessment, and for structural change around racial justice in our churches. To connect with God's mission in the world means diving into big issues and complex challenges like dismantling racism, engaging new technology and forms of communication, healing of the environment, connecting with each other in new and different ways, working to end poverty, abuse, and violence. WDC's mission is to empower all of you, our congregations, to do this work with courage and with joy as worshiping, learning, loving communities of healing and hope. So I encourage and I thank you for your active participation in your local congregation. And I boldly ask and thank you for your generous financial support and prayer support for Western District Conference and its leaders and all congregations. We have important work to do because God is doing important work. So now and in the days ahead, let us together witness and invite others to faith in Jesus Christ, dwell in just and loving relationships, and connect to God's mission in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. At many delegate sessions, we have a variety of oral reports, especially from our conference commissions, supplementing whatever has been printed or posted. This year, we've again asked them to offer a written report as well as video snapshots summarizing their work, their challenges, their dreams. I trust you've read and viewed those submissions. Rather than simply rehearse what's already been offered, this year we're simply reserving a few minutes where you might offer feedback or ask questions of those respective commissions. Again, utilize the chat feature of Zoom or the comment feature of Facebook Live to present such queries, perhaps noting to whom and what it's directed, if that is clear. We've divided the interaction with the commissions. This first hour will start with the Ministerial Leadership Commission, which helps congregations find and sustain pastoral leadership and serves the unique needs of pastors and church planters through support, accountability, and credentialing. The MLC has been chaired by Rachel F. Miller this year. I'm going to pause at this point to see if any questions have come forth and pose them to Rachel at this time. We might have Rachel F. Miller's screen presented live just in case any questions do come up. I'll note that we did not require our commission chairs to have any oral report prepared. We were simply anticipating there might be a few minutes of conversation, response to any queries, but if none are forthcoming, we don't have to dally in regard to that either. Some of them, I think, may be breathing a sigh of relief if they don't have to be on the on the screen or responding to any queries. We're not sure completely how time management will go for this. Some of the features of this meeting are taking a little longer because we're doing it virtually. Others will go a bit shorter. So we are aiming to end about 11 a.m. with a break of approximately 10 minutes around 10 o'clock. I have not been seeing any questions or comments forwarded, directed to the Ministerial Leadership Commission. And so I think we will, okay, I am seeing one here, but this seems to pertain more to what we will talk about in a few minutes relating to the budget. So we'll pause. I think we're going to move on to the next segment then of our assembly. I do want to note that the Ministerial Leadership Commission will also have a role in tomorrow's assembly worship, which all are encouraged to join virtually. We'll turn next to the Stewardship Commission, which has been chaired for a number of years now by Dwight Flaming. I'll note I've appreciated working with him on a number of projects during that time. Appreciated working with all of the commission chairs, but some of them I've gotten to know better. They have been overlapping with my term of service for virtually the entire period. The Stewardship Commission is charged with oversight of legal, financial, personnel, and property matters. It also encourages participation in the ministries of the conference through prayer, through volunteerism, and financial support, with an emphasis on first fruits giving. Are there any questions or feedback for the Stewardship Commission? I'll maybe pose this one to you, Dwight, coming from Derek. It says, I am curious if the recent national economic reporting creates any concern for the future income of the conference. Dwight, would you have a general response to that? We may talk about that more specifically in relationship to the budget in just a few minutes further.
I think it's very much like what happens within our churches. There's varying degrees of financial impact of where we are at right now. This comes into play just as a lot of other factors of our finances for the conference as we look at transitions in our demographics from the age distribution of our participants in churches and in congregations as congregations change. It's difficult to know on our local level how to respond to the economic conditions we're in right now, and it's even more difficult on the conference level, I feel. So it's a indirect response that I'm offering because I don't really have a good answer to what that means at the conference level. We appreciate the ongoing giving that has been coming into our churches, to the conference, and that creates some anxiety knowing that we're in uncharted territory. So I do acknowledge that. It's a good question. And I know that the executive board has wrestled with some of these same questions that the Stewardship Commission has had to deal with as they work to finalize the budget after it left the hands of the Stewardship Commission.
Thank you, Dwight. I just add a further comment myself. Heidi referenced this in her comments as well, and you've alluded to it, that the experience of our respective congregations, I think, varies significantly. In my own congregation, Zion Mennonite of Elbing, Kansas, very few folks were impacted vocationally They almost essentially no one lost their job. Some of them were laid off for just several weeks, whereas almost everybody received this stimulus check. Some have had almost better financial circumstances the last while than previously. And so it causes all of us to ponder how best we can share our good fortune and our poor fortune. I note another comment from Alberto. I believe this is Alberto Parchment, saying thank you to those who've given to the Western District Conference Hope Fund, which we have then sought to share and will be continuing to share with other congregations throughout our conference. Are there any further questions or feedback for the Stewardship Commission if you'd like to note in the chat feature? If not, Beth Yoder, Western District Conference's business manager, will now present the financial reports of the past year and introduce the coming year's budget, that being for 2021. They've been posted on the website for a number of days now, so all delegates, and well, I think anyone should have been able to download them. And Beth will have a variety of things highlighted in a PowerPoint presentation as well. Immediately following her presentation, I'll ask if there are any questions, and then we'll proceed to take action on the proposed 2021 budget. Beth?
All right, thank you, Ray. Yes, I'm going to give a brief overview of the year ended January 31st, 2020, which I'll refer to as the year 2019. I'll give a brief statement about where we're at in our current year. And then, as Ray said, we will look at the budget for 2021, which will be the year ending January 31st, 2022. So as you can see, our fiscal year runs from February 1st to January 31st. Our accounts are audited by Knudsen Monroe and Company, and that audit report is available to any member upon request. Looking at the year ended January 31st, 2020, as you can see, our conference is supported primarily by our congregations through church and individual giving. This past year, 72% of our income came from our congregations and constituents, 4% from rent payments, interest, and other travel and office refunds. 16% was from the bequest fund. The policy on our bequest fund is that 10% is added to the budget each year. An executive board does have the authority to allocate up to 20% in the event that other sources of income are needed to meet the current year expenses. In 2019, $16,465 above that 10% was moved to the budget. This additional amount above the 10% was approved by the executive board at their April 4th meeting. Restricted accounts supplied 4% of our income, as did personnel rebates from grants and other organizations. This brought our total income to $493,609. And as you can see with expenses, 11% were from executive board, 36% from ministerial leadership, 20% from resource commission, 14% for stewardship commission, and 19% for church planting. Expenses are divided out among the executive board in 4 commissions. Each commission categories include the cost of employing staff, staff travel, and office operating expenses. All the percentages you see here, both for income and expenses, were very close to the prior year. Contributions didn't necessarily go down. In fact, they were very similar to the prior year. And no commissions overspent their budget. In fact, most were under budget. Before I move on to the 2021 budget, just to give you an idea of where we're at this year, as of June 30th, we were 42% through the fiscal year. Our income was at 16% of what was budgeted, and expenses were at 28%. Giving is down slightly from the prior year at this point. And will come as no surprise, interest earnings are down compared to where they were last year, but expenses were also down as staff are traveling less, and with Byron's resignation at the end of January, we have a little less staff expense there as well. I would also note that we did apply for and receive a loan through the Payment Protection Plan, which helped with 2 months of payroll and utility costs, as well as a portion of a third month. At this point, we are not able to apply for forgiveness, but when that does happen, we do expect most, if not all, of that loan to be forgiven, and at that point, it will be will appear as income on the income statement. So moving on to the 2021 budget, if you've not seen it already, it is posted along with the budget notes on the WDC website with other assembly reports and information. Looking at our expenses, again, Executive Board and 4 commissions share the cost of employing staff, staff travel, sabbatical funds, repayment of a building repair loan, and office operating expenses. In the budget notes that are posted online, I have included the percentages of how those items are divided among the board and commissions. So you can see that there. So just noting what else is included in each commission's budget, as well as the executive board. As you can see on the screen, executive board budget is $57,229. This includes funds to assist WDC delegates to attend the MCUSA biennial sessions, for reference council expenses, and for WDC representatives to attend the MCUSA Constituency Leadership Council, or excuse me, Leaders Council. Ministerial Leadership Commission budget is $198,664. This includes funds for ministerial credentialing, meetings and workshops such as Healthy Boundaries training and other ministers' resourcing events, and seminary scholarships to encourage MCUSA seminary attendance. The Church Plant Commission budget is $112,404, and their budget contains funds used to support new church plants. Resource Commission is $108,457. Their budget includes a subsidy for Mennonite Library and Archives at Bethel College, which houses WDC archives, funds for resources and maintenance in the Conference Resource Library, and funds for youth ministry programs. Stewardship Commission budget is $71,232, and this includes funds for communications as well as the annual audit and insurance payments. This brings the total 2021 budget to $547,986. And moving on to our income, this is made up of contributions from our constituents, as well as personal rebates from other organizations, rent, office, and travel refunds, funds from several restricted accounts, which are divided out on the budget, as well as interest. As you can see on the slide here, the contributions from churches and individuals are the vast majority of our income. We want to thank you for your contributions and the ways that you support WDC. These contributions are what help us provide services to our congregations and allow congregations to benefit from connections with each other. This budget was set by the Stewardship Commission and approved by Executive Board. Ray, I will turn it back to you for further discussion and action.
Thank you very much, Beth, for this brief overview of both the financial reports of the 2019 year, a few comments on our current 2020 year, and then offering a little overview of the proposed 2021 budget. As I noted earlier, the full budget has been available, posted on the website for some days or weeks now, at this point available to delegates and others. If I could have us move back to the live screen rather than to turn off the screen sharing of Beth's screen. There's a foible in this where I'm not able to see if there are any chats that come up when there is a slideshow on or a PowerPoint. So the proposed 2021 budget arrives before us as a motion from the Executive Board. So before proceeding on to any discussion, I suppose I should ask, is there a second to this, the motion to accept this budget? If so, please indicate that in the chat feature, offering your name and congregation. Michelle Armster from Lorraine Avenue seconds the proposed 2021 budget. Are there any questions or any discussion of the budget? If so, please again utilize the chat feature, again noting your name and the congregation for which you serve as a delegate. I'll generally defer to Beth and or Dwight or other commission chairs or others if necessary to respond to question. However, while we're waiting just a bit to see if delegates offer any response, let me offer a few comments of my own at this time, somewhat responding to some questions that were raised last year at our delegate session about an ongoing trend of expenses exceeding income. The Executive Board has been aware of this challenge for some time, and as Dwight noted, we've engaged with the Stewardship Commission and others regarding it. Let me note some specific actions we've taken in the last year to respond to this, including, first of all, in conjunction with extending another term to our conference minister, Heidi Regier-Kreider, we've revised her job description to include more focus on fundraising and development work. While we hope some of that yields fairly quick results, solicitation of bequests and similar investment in the work and mission of Western District Conference can be more long range in focus as well. We continue across the board, or shall I say across the commissions, to see if there are areas where we can be more frugal. You'll note the budget asking is less this year than last. One significant shift has been that the Church Planning Commission has reduced its request for support of church planters from what might be called more aspirational to actual expectations and their intent to support 2 church planters during the 2021 year. Finally, bear in mind that the financial reports relate to the fiscal year that ended this last January, whereas the budget before us pertains to the fiscal year that will begin next February, all of which kind of skips over the fiscal year we're in the middle of right now. Beth offered a few comments about that. The year we're in has been an unusual year financially as well as about every other year. Certain elements have been quite positive. There have been some fairly significant bequests received. We've chosen to leave the one associate conference minister position unfilled for 6 months now, resulting in less expense for salaries. As Beth noted, Western District applied for and received this payroll protection plan loan under the Federal CARES Act. On the negative side, individual and congregational donations have been down some, particularly the last several months, and conference investments have been affected by the the market volatility, although I will note that it's not been as negative as I at one point suspected it might be. Thus, the fiscal year we're currently in may not end up being as negative as some of the last several have been, but we will have to wait and see how that turns out at the end of January. That said, this disparity between expense and income is an ongoing issue for officers, for the executive board, really for all of us to take to heart and to address as best we can, either by actions if we're in leadership roles, or seeing if we can increase our own support, especially financial support for Western District as it witnesses to and dwells in and connects with God's mission in the world. Now let me shift over and see if there have been any questions or comments about the budget that have presented. I'm seeing one about or a technological question. I will leave that well, I'll comment in general. I believe the way this has been set up, that we've configured this Zoom webinar, the chat offerings are only seen at this point by the panelists, and we will seek to note them to you and comment as best we can in response. So it was intentionally configured that not all attendees would be able to see all of the chat submissions of all attendees. We just hope that there would be less crosstalk and unassociated chatter going on. I am seeing a question, a comment, a perspective from Tim Amore of Beatrice Mennonite Church. Just noting, I am uncomfortable that we as an Anabaptist conference applied for and accepted money from the government. Can we vote or something to not do that in the future? I will agree that we did not place this before the entire delegate body as a vote to be acted on. This came up in a fairly narrow window, and it was primarily some of the officers and stewardship commission which made a decision. There certainly was some back and forth discussion on various points about the ethics of doing this. I'm noting that there is a suggestion that we might place before the delegate body at some point a decision not to do this into the future, but I have not seen that proposed as a specific motion at this time. Even though there are others, I see Derek King is responding to Tim's comments, noting he has similar concerns, but is not proposing any specific action. Tim Amore again asks, can we vote to pay the money back now? I do not believe it wise or consistent with our theological faith commitments to be doing this. Dan Eigsty responds to all panelists, the purpose of the PPP was to stimulate economic activity. I'm going to ask Dwight, would you perhaps want to review some of the decisions that were noted amongst those of us who discussed this about why we chose to apply for this PPP loan, and maybe address the specific technical question of when, can we pay it back already at this point?
I will try to recall that. It's been, as we've all experienced, there's been a lot that has happened in the last number of months. So but anyway, there was considerable dialogue that in processing that, trying to figure out how to respond. As Ray noted, this came up on, there was a very narrow window of time in that application process. And so we, to the best of our ability, we tried to process it to see how it would apply to Western District Conference. Likewise, there were churches that were also processing this at the same time. The end result was that we felt like the uncertainty that we were entering into was such that this would allow us to continue the ministries of Western District Conference in the event that we really did not know. Hindsight is great. We can look back and we can say, okay, this is where it turned out, but we didn't have that luxury at the time. The ability or the option to pay the loan back, it'd be my understanding that can be done from the technical standpoint. I would be uncomfortable right now to say that from a financial standpoint where that puts us. We are at the mercy of the support of congregations and individuals throughout our congregation conference, and we rely on that, and that's what allows us to continue functioning. We would use that money, that would be the funds that we would need to use to repay that loan if that was what was desired. I'm a little uncomfortable trying to make that decision in this format. I think that it might be more appropriate to allow the executive board, the stewardship commission to review that rather than to blanketly say something, make a decision now. There should be a process in place so that we'd have adequate dialogue, adequate processing, adequate information before we'd make that decision.
Thank you, Dwight. Let me summarize some of the other comments I have been seeing appearing in the chat feature. And these are coming to me from various different applications, so you'll see my eyes going all over the place as things appear on different screens before me. Some have noted that wondering how many churches, congregations accepted and applied for this PPP loan and how many did not. I might ask Heidi in just a moment to respond to that. I am not aware that we took any poll of that, and so it's somewhat only anecdotally that we may know about that. Some intentionally did not choose to do so. I'm aware of that from conversations with other pastors. Some intentionally chose to do so for varying reasons. Tim Amor notes further that his church did not accept or apply because we thought it was morally wrong for us to do so, and our staff took a pay cut instead. There have been some further discussion both from Tim and from Kent Moore and others, wondering about what the best process might be to go forward at this time, whether we should be taking action at this particular point as far as how to handle this particular loan, or whether we should do so in the future. Somebody else has suggested that those with concerns regarding the PPP loan, that would be Kent Moore from Rainbow Mennonite, that those with concerns bring forth a resolution for consideration at next year's assembly rather than address the matter on the fly now. A response from Tim has been that this all has happened on the fly, so it seems that our response must be on the fly as well. And wondering if a resolution might have been made to accept this in the first place. I would note that the difficulty of gathering all delegates together mid-year makes that quite problematic to do so. Another question has been how much the loan was for. My general recollection is it was somewhere around $70,000. Dwight, is that correct?
Yeah, Beth could speak to that more directly, but I believe that's correct.
Yeah, it was actually just over 61,000.
Okay, thank you. There was quite a bit of back and forth in adjustment of the application. There has been some other discussion on this. One thing I think we could do is simply take a general poll at this point. There have been some suggestions coming from various folks about doing this. Not necessarily make this a binding action, but at least get a sense of the delegate body. And so Ryan, if you could on the fly, I'm going to just use my own, I guess, prerogative at this point to make this a general sense of the body movement. Put a poll before us, something to the effect, I am in favor of accepting funds from government sources. Yes or no? This may get at least a sense of the body for this particular moment. And if there is clear indication one way or the other, we could follow forth in future delegate sessions with a specific resolution. Does that sound more or less what folks might be I'm scanning over perspectives as well at this point.
Ray, there was a comment offered to do it on a scale that might be less. That might be helpful to see once.
Ryan, are we able to have a scale of virtue, a scale poll, or is it simply a yes or no poll?
I can set multiple options here, maybe a 1 through 5 right. Sort of thing. If you give me just 2 or 3 minutes here, I can get that together.
All right. It does take a little bit of time to construct these new polls. Let me just review some of the other conversations. This is an interesting conversation. It's worth exploring. It brings up the question how we understand Anabaptist theology on this issue. Michelle Armster was noting this. From Bueller Mennonite Church, this might be make for an interesting or helpful question for future Western District virtual discussions, the pros and cons to help us guide through future decisions. From Evelyn, someone, to all panelists, is it really fair to ask our church leaders to bear the brunt of financial strain? This is another question from Bueller Mennonite Church. I missed how many delegates are in, quote, attendance right now. From what I am seeing on my screen, perhaps not all of you have the same features available. I note 120 are viewing through the Zoom application, and perhaps I assume there are further individuals watching via Facebook Live. Kim Amor adds further, I believe each church should be able to prayerfully discern this on their own, but I believe that we are all a part of our conference's discernment. Heidi Rieger-Kreider has noted that Mennonite Church USA Everence also offered assistance and resources in figuring out how to access the PPP loan, while recognizing that different congregations and conferences would have different approaches. Several other conferences also applied for PPP loans. Tim says again, thank you for hearing my concerns. I hope this doesn't derail the rest of our great online get-together. Someone thinks I'm doing an okay job, they actually say a great job, but it's also noting to me we have approximately 30 watching on Facebook Live at this time. Janice Friesen notes to Tim, thanks for bringing this up. It's worth taking some time for it.
Ray, I just offer comments that I really appreciate this feedback, because we definitely recognize that in the process of going through this, that there would be a wide spectrum of thoughts on this. And so we tried to do what we determined was, as we processed it and as we worked through it, we tried to be sensitive to that and yet do what we felt was in the best interest of Western District Conference. So I think we've seen that there is a difference of opinion in how we respond to these things, and that just kind of confirms the process that we went through in deciding to go ahead and move forward. Likewise, each individual congregation is going to have that same difference of opinion to some degree, and so we might have the opportunity to model that, how congregations can process that as well.
Just add a few additional comments I've seen from the chats. Michelle Armster notes, if contributing churches continue to fail to contribute, then what are the options for people we have called to serve the conference other than to cut salaries? Working for the church is a sacrifice, a loving sacrifice. Arlen, somebody, notes, will we continue to accept tax-exempt status? Ryan, do we have a sense of the body poll at this point that you could put up before us?
Yeah, I tried to phrase the poll in the best way that I could, and we have a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being you disagree wholeheartedly, and 5 being that you have no issue at all using government funds. And just, I tried to make sure I worded this question appropriately, but the question is about WDC as the conference body, not about individual churches. So just keep that in mind, I guess. So I'll launch the poll, Ray, if that's okay with you.
Thank you. So it should be appearing at least before the delegates. And if you could note, thank you for phrasing this as best you could, Ryan, indicate your sense of accepting government funds and submit that. We'll give another 15, 20 seconds for you to do that. And hopefully Ryan will be responding back to me for this. I'll note a couple other comments that have come up. The payroll protection plan was for both taxed and tax-exempt organizations. Someone has noted. So there was certainly nothing illegal, but there might still, for folks, be the question of whether it was wise or ethical to have done so.
I'm going to end this poll here in about 5 seconds if anybody else wants to vote.
I'll be waiting to see. I believe on this occasion, Ryan will be reporting the response back to me, and I will try to summarize it for you as best I can. While we're waiting for that, we have had an interesting discussion. Yeah, I do have a response now. I am trying to add up the total numbers here. It looks to be about
103 voted.
103 voted.
Mm-hmm.
Of those 103, 64 indicated that they were either 4 or 5, in other words, in favor of accepting such funds. 18 indicated that they were neutral, number 3, the central position, whereas 21 indicated that they were either 1 or 2. in disagreement of accepting such funds. So I would characterize that as a significant spread or diversity, even though there is a majority in favor. I personally think it's wise that we have further discernment and discussion about this in some format, but perhaps that might be for another meeting or another time. I think it is worthwhile to have this sense before the executive board and officers in case to help guide in just over the next few weeks and months as we proceed forward. I think I would like us to return to consideration of the budget. Are there any, we've been talking about the payroll protection plan application for some minutes now, but we have before us on the floor the motion to accept the budget. Are there any further comments or discussion about that? I'm noting we're already past the time when we would break, but if there are no, and I'm noting that Tim has summarized the verbal discussion I gave, and he's done so accurately. Are there any further comments or questions about accepting the 2021 budget? I'm seeing nothing further put before us. If not, I think I'd like to move to the poll, the voting on the budget to approve the 2021 budget recommendation as currently before the delegates. Ryan, could you put that poll before us at this time? So do you approve the 2021 budget recommendation as currently before the delegates? Please enter your yes or your C or your no, and submit. We will quite shortly pause for a bit of a break to allow you to stretch your legs or get a drink. Perhaps before doing that, I believe there will be a tally of our vote on the budget quite shortly, and I'd like to report that before we break. Unfortunately, unlike gathering in person, we don't have the option of a direct fellowship that's so valuable, but feel free to offer some shout outs in the chat or the comment sections or to text others. And I will note that the motion to approve the 2021 Western District Conference budget carries overwhelmingly, nearly unanimously, and so the motion to approve this budget has been accepted. At this time, let's pause. Initially, I was thinking for 10 minutes. Why don't we see if we can keep that to 5 or 6 minutes and get a bit of exercise, get a drink, whatever you need to do. According to my time, we are 10:14. So let's aim to resume back about 10:20. My assumption is we may have to go a little past 11 o'clock, but hopefully not too much further. I'll see you in just a few minutes again.
Hey, Ray.
Yes.
It appears that several people are not getting these polls to pop up on their screen when we launch them. And I've been working behind the scenes on that a little bit, and I don't have a good solution for that. I would say during this break time, if you would be willing to leave the meeting and rejoin it via the link that you were originally sent in your email, hopefully that might resolve the issue. Otherwise, I'll keep working on it. So sorry about that, but I think it's working for the majority of people.
So that is for the individuals who have not been having polls pop up, even though they were delegates. So I believe Ryan's comment is to try to log out, leave the session, and then re-log in and see if that addresses this. believe I'd like to call us back to order. After a brief break, we've had to refresh ourselves, and we'll shortly move on to some further agenda. I would want to comment a bit on some chat that has been going on during the break. I believe I'll need to have you revert to the camera so that I can see the chat feature. If the PowerPoint is up, I'm not able to see the chat that is appearing. But the recollection I have is that there was some concern about why certain individuals' chats were seen and available by everyone, and other folks' chats were not being seen. That was an intentional decision that was made by the assembly planning team and technical support individuals in order to keep from us from being overwhelmed by 120 or more people constantly chatting, and thought there might be so much that it would overwhelm us. Thus it was intentionally set up so that the so-called panelists, which are primarily the officers, the commission chairs, and several of the staff, had what were called panelist status. Tim Amore was included on that because he was on the assembly planning team, and that's why many of you have been seeing his comments as well. There are just a couple other comments. Victor is noting, please leave the polls on the screen for a bit more time, as we didn't get a chance to respond. So that might be a comment for our host to keep in mind. And there's been some suggestions to me as well. I'm looking to see, I thought there was another comment or two I might have. Sandra Martinez has been receiving some questions from the Hispanic pastors, as whom made the decision to take the PPP loan. That was a combination of some of the officers, myself as Dwight, as the chair of the Stewardship Commission, Beth and Heidi were involved in that decision as well. So it did not go even before the entire executive board. The decision seemed to have to be made within several days to make that particular decision. I think I want to return to our anticipated agenda. I'd like to begin by noting that various individuals, officers, members of the executive board, commissions, committees, as well as task forces and representatives to other institutions are completing terms of service at this assembly or with this assembly. Some of them have served a couple of years, some of them have served multiple terms by this point. And I know a few are immediately entering into new assignments for Western District or have agreed to stand for a second term. Lois Barrett will now note those who've served elected positions in particular. In this setting, we aren't able to have you stand in order to recognize you like we might do in an in-person gathering. Lois?
Yes, from the executive board, of course, Ray Reimer from Zion Mennonite Church in Elbing, Kansas, is our outgoing moderator. And also leaving the executive board will be Wayne Albrecht from Peace Mennonite Church in Dallas, Texas, who's served 2 terms on the executive board. From the Resource Commission, Sue Ellen Casares from Aposento Alto in Wichita will be leaving. And from the Stewardship Commission, Dwight Fleming from Alexanderville and Gossel, who's chaired that commission for 2 terms now. There are, of course, many more who've been appointed to committees or task forces or as representatives to other institutions, or who volunteer in a variety of ways, and we want to thank them also for their service. So thank you for your diligent and faithful service. And maybe people who have cameras on can turn their cameras on and we'll all clap.
Artie Gehring, Chair of the Gifts Discernment Committee, will introduce the ballots at this time.
Good morning. On behalf of the Gifts Discernment Committee, we believe there are many great people in the congregations who can serve the Western District. Our job is to find them and to bring balance and inclusion to each group. We are very dependent upon the suggestions that people have given us in the past. In past meetings, there has been a form that you could fill out and that would be given to us with an opportunity to suggest specific names, and that is not happening this year because everything is different. I believe that we are working on an online opportunity for people to give suggested names, and hopefully that information will come out and you will see that and you will take that seriously. I just want to make one note that if you have given us a suggestion in the past and you have seen that that person is not called, it's probably because we were looking for a specific characteristic that year, such as the gender, what state you were from, what the age group, and so the suggestion you gave us may not have fit what we were looking for that particular year. But we do keep track of those names for future years, and we come back to those names and use them at another time. So please, please continue to give us suggestions and to think and pray about that in the future. The nominees for this year's ballot are the following: Moderator-elect DeLon Martins, First Church of Hutchinson, Kansas. For Secretary, June Crable, Eden Church, Moundridge, Kansas. June is eligible for a second term. For Executive Board, Vicki Penner, Southern Hills Church, Topeka, Kansas, and Vicki is also eligible for a second term. And the other nominee for Executive Board is Kent Moore, Rainbow Mennonite Church, Kansas City, Kansas. On the ballot are two names for the Gifts Discernment Committee. Those names are put forward by the Executive Board and not our particular committee. Those names are Eldon Epp from First Church in Ransom, Kansas, and myself, Artie Gehring, from Gossel Mennonite Church, Gossel, Kansas. For the Church Planting Commission, Karen Masco from Joy in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Karen is eligible for a second term. Tanya Raymer Wenger from First Church in Hutchinson, Kansas. Tanya is also eligible for a second term. For the Ministerial Leadership Commission, Todd Schlosser from Huffnensow, Inman, Kansas. Rachel Epp Miller, San Antonio, Texas, and Rachel is eligible for a second term. For the Resource Commission, Graciela Tiarina from Casa Betania in Newton, Kansas, and Christina Litwiller from Salina, Kansas. Christina is eligible for a second term. And finally, for the Stewardship Commission, Matt Lehman Weens from Lorraine Avenue, Wichita, Kansas, and Matt is eligible for a second term. We have another position open for the Stewardship Commission. At this time, we do not have a nomination, a name for that. We are continuing to work on that, and I think, Ray, that is up to the delegate body as to how they want to proceed with that.
Artie, there's a request that you share the ballot on the PowerPoint. Is that possible?
I don't have the capacity to do that. I have it, yeah, I just have, sorry.
Okay, so in that case, Joanna Heriter has noted that the ballot is available on the website, and I will forward that to all participants so you can look at that.
Thank you, Kathy. That ballot has been posted, I think, for about a week now, but perhaps some did not, it was not there when you first registered or something, so you may not have seen it, but I encourage you to go and look at that at this time. As already noted, brief information concerning each of the delegates that has been included on the ballot sheet, and she noted that there is one open or unfilled position on the Stewardship Commission, despite their hard work of the Gifts Discernment Committee in attempting to fill all positions. We have a couple of options concerning that, I believe. First, a nomination from the floor is a possibility, and I'll say a bit more about that in just a moment. Alternatively, unless you as delegates instruct otherwise, I believe we can interpret your vote for the slate as it's been presented as conveying ongoing responsibility to the Gifts Discernment Committee to continue their discernment work for this open position. And once that bears fruit, to have the executive board act on your behalf to appoint whatever individual arises to discernment, to the Stewardship Commission. Further, our bylaws allow for additional nominations from the floor for any position. I do remind you that offering such nomination requires that you have already asked and made sure the individual you're proposing is willing to serve. So if there are any nominations from the floor, please note that in the chat feature at this time. I'll give a few seconds and be looking to see if any nominations are coming forward. I am not seeing any. So let's turn to consideration of the slate overall. I would invite a motion from the floor to cast a unanimous ballot, unless there is opposition to that. Is there a second? And I believe that one has already appeared from Wilmer Harder at Bueller Mennonite Church to accept the ballots as presented as a complete ballot. And I'm not seeing any other comment regarding that. So I'll ask for the poll regarding general acclamation for the ballot which has been proposed to be placed before us at this time. And Ryan, if you recall the further comment, could you leave it up maybe a little longer than has occurred in the past? So
have people had a chance to see the budget that was going to be posted?
Are you
There were
talking
some people that were requesting that.
the budget or the ballot?
I mean, my mistake, the ballot.
The ballot has been posted on the website for perhaps approximately a week.
Right.
And it is the same as what Artie just reviewed orally for us. It is not, unfortunately, technologically possible, apparently, for us to place it in full on the screen at this point.
Ray, you would like me to go ahead and launch the poll at this time?
Yes, the poll for the ballot. And I'm noting in the script I circulated, I have the wrong information there regarding which poll this is, but it would be for so do you affirm the whole ballot as presented? And again, indicate your yes or your no and hit the submit button. And we'll leave this up for 45 seconds or a minute. Let me go back while we're waiting for a response to that poll and make just a few other comments. I noted earlier that the decision to apply for this PPP loan was made by a small leadership group. That was in fact the case, but because the loan application needed to be submitted the day prior to an upcoming executive board meeting, this issue was discussed at the executive board meeting of April 4, and the executive board did take action to affirm the action of staff to apply for the CARES Act loan. So that does appear in the executive board minutes. But as has been noted in wider discussion and comments through the chats and other features, this may well be something which we wish to discuss further as we go forth. There is appreciation to the Gifts Discernment work for their hard work on pulling together the ballot. Derek King notes that. Some are noting that they have rebooted and are still not receiving the poll. And there are some additional suggestions as to who might be considered for the open position.
Ray, there is a question about how long are terms.
Yes.
The commission terms are 3 years each. The moderator-elect and secretary serve 2-year terms.
So it does vary a bit from position to position, but for many of them, they are 3 years.
And I appreciate the suggestion given for a specific name. We do have several names that we are still working with that we are going to ask, but we will put that name down for either this year or future years.
I will note that the motion to approve the ballots, I tried to move that as initially, and my recollection is that it was seconded by Wilmer T. Harder from Beulah Mennonite Church. That's just for the benefit of our secretary. Looking to see if there is any response to the poll at this time.
I have not entered the poll yet, Ray, but I will do so now. If anyone wants to vote, please.
About 5 or 10 seconds, and then we will end that poll. Again, the overall ballot has been accepted with overwhelming support, not completely unanimous, but very strong affirmation. So the motion carries, and I welcome the new members of the various boards and commissions and committees to service within Western District. Why don't we pause for just a moment of prayer together at this time? We praise your name, O Lord, for calling out these individuals from our midst. We encourage them to consider their assignments as God at work in and through them, ministering to needs across our conference and beyond. And we pledge our support of their service, and we'll continue to pray for them. Amen. We're going to move to some further responses or questions regarding the posted reports. During this second session of our delegate gathering, we'll hear further about how God is at work among us from our Church Planning Commission, from the Western District Resource Commission, and from Camp Manasquah. Again, you might start offering any feedback or comments or questions you'd like to pose to any of those groups in the chat feature if you haven't done so already. First of all, we'll consider the Church Planning Commission. They've had a written report and a video snapshot that's been up. I would ask if there are any questions for them. They are tasked with resourcing church planning initiatives and fostering relationships with emerging Anabaptist Mennonite groups. Tanya Raymer-Wenger is prepared to respond to any queries. I am seeing no specific comments or queries come forward. I do want to thank the Church Planning Commission for their work. I know they've had a particularly interesting a year with Byron Pellicer leaving mid-year, and they've had to step up in a variety of ways and assist our church planners and our church plants as a commission, and walk alongside them in ways which perhaps they didn't anticipate as they agreed to serve as members of the commission. Let's turn next to the Resource Commission, which has the responsibility of empowering Western District congregations as they witness Jesus Christ in the Anabaptist Mennonite tradition, connecting with God's mission in the world and providing faith formation resources for all ages with oversight of the resource library. Christina Litwiller has chaired this commission over the last while and stands or sits ready to respond. I am going back. I see a question has come in directed to the Church Planning Commission, and we'll repeat it here. Have you all discussed any specific ways you might broaden involvement from so-called legacy churches in church planting, particularly in encouraging them to rethink their potential to replant themselves? We'll go back to Tanya. Would you like to respond for that question orally, utilizing the camera and microphone?
Yes, sorry. Uh-oh.
We're getting all kinds of feedback there.
I'm really sorry. We have a number of devices going. Give me just a second. I did reply to the chat. The simple, easy answer is yes. We are discussing that and are excited about continuing to talk about that. Is that enough of an answer? We also note that in our report as well.
Thank you.
Would you like more, Ray, or is that enough of an answer?
I think that's enough for now. I will note, I believe the feedback probably came, some of our congregations are gathering together in little watch parties. So there are a number of people together in one room, and that sometimes makes for some feedback if we aren't getting microphones turned off. I raised the next commission as being the Resource Commission. And I'm watching to see if anything comes forward to that. I've not seen that thus far, although I see another question directed to the next entity with which we will interact, and that will be Camp Menascaugh. Because of our long history with Camp Menascaugh, we reserve a bit of time in each of our delegate sessions each year for them to report and share as well, even though they're now an independent entity. The last several years, Michael Unruh has represented the camp before us in his role as executive director. I presume many of you are aware that he resigned from that role earlier this spring to take on new responsibilities with Bethel College. And so Olivia Bartle, the camp director, is representing Camp Menascaugh. And I see there is a question directed to you. I know it was a wrenching decision to cancel summer camp programming, but thank you for allowing us to have our annual church retreat there on Sunday. And many thanks to the camp in a box for the camp in a box bags. Our particular congregation, this is coming from Bueller Mennonite Church, purchased one for each of our camp-aged kids, and we received many high reviews and thank yous. One child announced it was the best thing they ever received in the mail. So thank you. Olivia, would you like to have any response to that, or just offer any few brief comments about how this summer and spring has gone for the camp?
Heart-wrenching is absolutely accurate. It's been hard to see the campgrounds empty. It's been hard to know that we haven't been able to reach out to people who have really needed that time at camp to escape and to have those moments with God as they interact with nature and with others. So it continues to be hard. People are welcome to come out. We are limiting the number of people or the number of groups that come out to camp, but people are welcome to come out. I'm actually hoping the phone doesn't ring. We had someone who called just a few seconds ago in regards to coming out to camp, so that's encouraging. We continue to hope to be able to make those connections with congregations and with campers as we look towards the fall, and recognizing that many of the retreats that had postponed are now being canceled simply because the coronavirus is not as contained, or not contained enough for the comfort of those who plan to come out. But yeah, some very hopeful things as well. The summer staffers were out here at camp and they did videos, which maybe people had seen, and most of them were able or chose to donate most of their time or some of their time out at camp, recognizing that we had limited funds in terms of what we could offer them. So that was seeing those sorts of things, or having those sorts of experiences and having groups interested in coming out are very, very warming and helpful.
Thank you, Olivia. I think we all sense how heart-wrenching these last months have been for you and for all of those connected with the staff. I would want to challenge one of the things you said, that you haven't been able to connect with people. You haven't been able to connect in the same way that has happened, but I'm seeing in the comments that there's a lot of appreciation for the creativity that you personally and the other staff have done in coming up with this camp in a box idea, in posting videos, in reaching out in many, many ways. It hasn't been the same, and that touches our hearts and feels very, very, very hard for all of us. But we lift you up in prayers and wish to find ways to support you as well.
Prayers are definitely needed and very much appreciated.
There's lots of suggestions and affirmation I'm seeing showing up on the chat feature. The appreciation for the Camp in a Box, youth groups having gone out and had a wonderful week of service, and so on and so forth. I think I want to move back to the Resource Commission at this time. There was a question from Mitzi Moore. I don't know if it was a question or comment from San Antonio Mennonite Church, doing a book group study, reading theologians of color. They searched the resource library for the titles we have chosen so far and see one or new copies. And so encouraging more copies of such books. And there's been a response already. Thank you for the suggestions, and noting that they can be sent to the resource library director. I think there, I think I missed a comment at some point, and there's been some further feedback about them. Christina, have you been noting any comments you would like to respond to as you've been monitoring the chat as well? Christina, your microphone, you'll need to unmute yourself here. We still are not hearing you.
On behalf of Resource Commission, I only saw the one comment so far regarding resourcing. So if there are any others, or if you feel like you wrote a question or made a comment that we haven't addressed yet, please resend. Thanks.
Very good. I am seeing further affirmation for the awesome work that Olivia and the summer staff have done for the Mennonite ministry. This is from Kathy Bittekofer saying, "Our church loves Camp Mennonite." Arlen too notes, "Our church camping program, Camp Mennonite, is the most significant home mission program the church has. It's mission directed at our own mission field." And thanks to all the staff who put out the Facebook videos. They were great and much appreciated. A great reminder of how camp is. Our youth group had a wonderful week of service at camp. This is from Wendy Schrog. Thanks for making that happen. There's notes that there would be significant interest in hearing the story of Beatrice Mennonite Church at some point. Not now, I don't believe. I'm keeping a bit of track on the time as well, but various folks are interested in that. I know there was a bit of review of that in the some of the snapshots that were offered, and others would be interested perhaps as well, and wondering if maybe we could have a webinar or some sort of conference-initiated discussion of that at some point. And Tonya notes, we'll continue working toward resourcing replanting in our conference, even as we also encourage and support new church plants. I think there's good potential actually for some of the synergy and mutual learning between new church plants and those wanting to replant. Well, we've scheduled some time here at the end of our delegate session to provide for open discussion or comments. If you have something you'd like to offer to this body of Western District Conference that we have not dealt with so far, or if you'd like to expand on something we've already been discussing, whether it be a question, a challenge, a testimony, a brief introduction of a new initiative we've not heard about yet, now is the time. Again, please utilize the chat function in Zoom or the comment feature in Facebook Live to note your perspective, or to ask permission to directly speak, and note which church you represent. If there are any, we recognize and highlight with a camera or microphone. Please be brief, preferably no more than a minute or so, and certainly no more than a couple. We can unmute folks fairly easily. If you wish to do that, it takes a few seconds, I believe, to shift over to that. But I will allow that if any are requesting that permission. Let's continue reading some of the chats I'm seeing coming up. It's from Laura Gertzen. When our son got his camp in a box, he set up a cabin under our dining room table and slept and played there for a week, doing his best to imitate a camp schedule. Someone is there is a question from Jeannie, someone, and wondering how long the church planting position. I assume that means the associate conference ministry minister position will be on hold. Heidi, would you like to offer any update as to, I know there is a search in process. Would you like to comment where that stands?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Yeah, assuming that the question about the church planting position refers to the associate conference minister based in Texas. That role is to be a liaison and support to work with our congregations and leaders in Texas, and also to work with our church planting commission to nurture church plants anywhere in our conference. That search is in process, and I would say we haven't put it on hold per se, but recognize that it would be several months before we were ready to begin the search, because we adjusted the job description, did some review of that. So the position was announced in April, later April, and then has been in process. So that is still in process, and our hope is to fill the position as soon as we have a candidate that we feel is the right match for that. So we want to move forward as soon as that is possible. In the meantime, I thank Lee Lever, who is the pastor at Austin Mennonite Church in Texas, for giving some of his time to serve as our interim conference ministry liaison for our churches in Texas. And I am serving as the interim liaison with the Church Planting Commission right now during this time.
Thank you to those extra roles that both you and Lee have been filling these last number of months. I'm noting a few other comments in the chat feature, just some information about those who would like to view the snapshots the different congregations have offered, in particular the Beatrice Mennonite Church, which has been noted as it is in the process of they call replanting. So those have been offered to folks, and we will see if some of that can be applied in other conference information that's distributed beyond just the chat. I'm scanning to see if there are other items coming up. If not, I am noting the clock. We are approaching the end of the time we have scheduled together. So just let me offer a few announcements as we end this year's delegate session. We are not at the end of our annual assembly per se. There's still a lot to be experienced together. This afternoon, there are a variety of workshops, both at 1 p.m. and 2:15 p.m. And our keynote speaker is available at 3:30 for conversation. Tomorrow, Sunday morning, there's the opportunity to worship together virtually at 10 a.m. via Facebook Live. Just a brief note that the Western District Fall Reference Council is planned for Saturday, September 26th. This is a gathering when the Executive Board, the Commissions, the Gifts Discernment Committee of Western District come together at the beginning of each new program year to coordinate and collaborate with each other. Lois, you have some further notes? Lois Barrett, were you going to comment about the Annual Assembly 2020?
Yes, sorry, I just had to punch all the right buttons here.
We're all struggling with that today.
We often announce the date and place of next year's assembly at the close of the current one. But because of the very turbulent times we live in and things are constantly shifting, we're not going to be able to specify this yet. In accord with the strategy that's been in place for some time, we'll be meeting in the northern part of the conference, probably Kansas next year, assuming we can have an in-person meeting. Most always we aim for late July or early August, and we'll share details with you as soon as we know more.
And Lois, would you want to also continue with a resolution of thanks?
Yes. Representing the Resolutions Committee, I have one last item for us at this time, a resolution of thanks. I think we may be able to put that up on the screen if I've just sent it to Kathy. The resolution is as follows. We, the delegates to the 2020 session of Western District Conference, give thanks to all those who have made this out of the ordinary meeting possible. To Daniel Carroll, our keynote speaker, for his insights on the Bible and immigration. To webinar leaders, worship leaders, interpreters, and chat monitors. To the Assembly Planning Committee, Kathy Neufeld-Dunn, the coordinator, Sandra Montes Martinez, Asia Fry, Samuel Voth-Schrag, Kim Amor, Catherine Boschel, and Bill Zerker. To Ryan Gertzen-Regier, the technology manager for this event. To all the delegates and participants who learned to navigate the technology. To all WDC board, commission, committee, and task force members, as well as the volunteers whose work throughout the year has contributed to this assembly, and especially to all Western District staff for their hard work in making this assembly possible.
Thank you, Lois. As moderator, I'll move that we accept this resolution of thanks. Is there a second for that? Please note that in the chat feature if you are willing to second accepting this resolution of thanks. And then from Cynthia Loganville, I think got in the first second. So one last poll then, all in favor of accepting this resolution of thanks. Ryan, if you could put that poll up, and please indicate yes if you are in favor, or if there are any brave enough to oppose it, you can indicate that as well. And note that and hit your submit button. Again, we will wait just a brief bit of time. I will wait to see what sort of response there might be. June, did you get the mover and the seconder? Very well. Ryan, why don't we close that poll at this point? And if you could give me any, I don't think this is going to be one of the more controversial polls we have taken. Oh my, we actually have a unanimous response on this one. So let me move to our final bit of business. In accord with the bylaws of Western District Conference, my own elected term of service as moderator is now ending. Let me briefly note that I accepted the role of moderator-elect 4 years ago because I I cared about not only the local congregation and God's people at work throughout the world, but about the specific ways that we network together in this particular region to do those things together, hopefully increasing our faithfulness and our effectiveness. This role has been challenging for me at times, but it has also been rewarding as I became much more aware of the vast array of creativity and energy that God's Spirit has unleashed amongst us. I've also delighted in making new friends and strengthening relationships with some old ones. So it's been a joy as well to work with our conference ministers and our staff. Let me assure you, they work hard and they work with their hearts. And now it's time to let others lead. I know the executive board is up to that task, and especially Lois Barrett, who becomes the moderator for the next biennium. Lois, I don't have a gavel to hand to you, and I wouldn't be able to anyway because you aren't in the same room with me. But at this time, I turn over the joys and the challenges of moderating a Western District Conference to you.
Well, I did find, and it isn't a gavel, it's a meat tenderizer, and I thought it might work for today. I want to especially thank you, Ray, for your leadership especially during the past 2 years that I've been on the executive board, for your wise and steady leadership through difficult times, sometimes, keeping us all on an even keel, and for your love for the church and your knowledge of its various aspects that we connect with as Western District Conference. I think Heidi has some words to say at this time as well.
Yes, thank you. I also want to add my deep, deep gratitude to Ray for his leadership as moderator. I work closely with him. He has been a great support, always available for conversation and consultation. Ray, I've appreciated your wisdom, your faithfulness to the church, your wry sense of humor, your ability to laugh with others and even at yourself sometimes, and your deep dedication to Christ. Thank you so much for serving Western District Conference, and we hope that you will sense some burden lifting, but that you will continue your support and prayers for WDC in the coming days. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we are now at the time for adjournment, but we need a motion to adjourn. Could we have someone move that? Maybe if you're in the chat, Michelle Armster says, I move to adjourn, and we need a second from Weldon Martins. And so we need a quick poll, Ryan, and if you can report the results to me. And we'll give you just a minute here to affirm this, although if you vote no, I'm not sure what comes next.
As this poll is happening, Lois, I'd like to point out that someone from Rainbow suggests a blessing of the meat tenderizer.
Okay, I think maybe if people have had a chance to vote. It was unanimous that we are adjourned until next year. So I hope to see you all in person next year at Western District Delegate Sessions. Thank you and goodbye.